Okay. Well, thank you very much. First of all, good morning, or I think it's morning for everyone who's attending here, at least for a few more minutes. And thank you very much for the opportunity to talk for a few minutes about some interdisciplinary research that we've been doing as part of work. This work is inspired by work that we're doing for INDOPACOM, and it's work that we've been working. It's a topic that I've been working on off and on for the last decade. And I think part of the impetus for having this presentation today is we have a patent that is pending on this work. So this is titled Combining Risk and Distance for INDOPACOM. And just a little bit of a fair warning. We're going to talk about policy, then we're going to talk about math, but then we're going to talk about policy. So just get through the math parts. It'll be okay. And also, as we begin, a special thank you to my students who have canceled lecture this morning and who are joining this virtually. So thank you for being here. Next slide, please. So at a very high level, this is the problem with a capital P that we're trying to get after. How far is it from here to there? This is an innocuously simple problem that, for those of you who have backgrounds in transportation or network science, will know that there are shelves of textbooks written about this problem. But the basic problem that we are trying to get around is how far is it from here to there? Now, it depends on who you ask, and it depends very specifically upon how you ask the question. If you ask, the sorts of software and approaches that are in use today, like if you ask Google, Waze, Apple Maps, whatever system you're going to like, it's going to say, well, it's the distance from here to there is a distance that is based on what roads are open. And so we're going to add up the distances. We're going to find the path from where you are to where you want to go that has the shortest total distance. And we're going to call that the distance from here to there. If you ask a probabilist or a statistician, and I'm a probabilist, you're going to get an answer that's going to be couched in terms of how much risk is it to get from here to there. And at a very, very high level, the way you determine the total aggregate risk is you multiply together the probability of surviving from each checkpoint to the next. So if I ask a route planner, I'm going to get an answer that's in terms of adding things. If I ask a probabilist, I'm going to get an answer in terms of multiplying things. Now, for 99% of the world, adding things is the right thing to do. And to be clear, when I go from Monterey to the airport, or even from Monterey across the country, adding things is what I want to do. However, if I'm worried about large scale combat scenarios, particularly in the INDOPACOM AOR, I care about risk. And no, I cannot warp the space-time continuum. Thank you. I care about risk, and I get there by multiplying. But I need to have a framework in order to measure both of these things at the same time, because they're both important to me. Next slide, please. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to compute the computation for the risk in a single unified framework. So we're going to put risk and distance in the same play. We're going to do this in a way that has really, really favorable runtime characteristics, because when you need an answer, you need it right now. You don't need it an hour from now. And then we're going to do it in a way that can be implemented on a small, and I mean small, computer. So that's what we're offering. That's what our research is about. Next slide, please. Okay, a block diagram of what we're doing here is we're going to get data input from whatever sources. We're going to use this with resident map and data from whatever sources exist. On board our system, we have a risk manager and a risk assessment engine that work in an iterative process. And using a little bit of mathematical sleight of hand that I'm going to show you in the next couple slides, it's going to generate courses of action, and those are going to be output wired or wirelessly, depending on how you want to communicate. It turns out that communicating with onboarding and offboarding data is really not the interesting dimension of this problem. Next slide, please. So here's the technical stuff. I have a background in applied mathematics, so there has to be an equation in my presentation. The big idea here is the risk distance is a combination of the linear distance, which is the distance you measure with a yardstick, times this somewhat complex looking thing on the right of the addition symbol, which is something to do with how we measure risk. And the Camelot and Certain Death is a reference to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. If you are looking to a risk calculation, no matter how you do it, should have the following favorable properties. If there's no risk of doing something, the distance should be zero. And if I'm facing certain death should be infinitely far away. So we've constructed this system to have those desirable properties. Next slide, please. What I'm going to take the equation on the left side and talk about convexity here for a minute. I'm making a risk martini, basically. So this parameter lambda, which is how much I favor risk versus how much I favor linear distance, is really just measuring, how much, if you were considering making a martini or a cappuccino, this is how much coffee and how much froth. And I can dial that up or down to create solutions where I really care about risk and I don't care about distance, or I really care about distance and I don't care about risk. By the way, all of these solutions are valid in the sense that they are useful. And the real idea here is that we're going to go from a lot of possible solutions and neck it down to a very small number in order to give the decision maker the ability to impose what they think is really important to them. Next slide, please. So each choice of lambda, that's the upside down Y looking thing, has a unique solution. Each solution either adjusts the current plan for overall risk distance. In other words, you're just going to change the numbers and you're going to get a different score, or you're going to pivot. Each of those pivots is going to be what planners call a course of action. So by adjusting this, we're going to create different courses of action. And so the big idea here is we're going from a huge set of possible actions to a very small number. And for folks that are into networks, we're putting all of the work into the objective function. So we're not introducing side constraints, which means I can still run the very fast algorithms that have been in use for a long time against this problem. I've reformulated how things are measured, but I haven't reformulated how the problem is solved. So I can use Dijkstra or Ford-Fulkerson if you want to iterate, and I can actually brute force solutions, which is desirable. It's not mathematically elegant, but if you need answers right now, you can just brute force them, and there's a case to be made for that. Next slide, please. So this is sort of an executive diagram of what this looks like. As you change the importance that you put on risk and distance, you end up having different courses of action. On the left, in this example, minimizing risk, I take sort of the southern route, and then on the right, minimizing distance, I take the northern route. Next slide, please. There is this other there is another parameter in here, kappa, which is which helps calibrate risk to the decision maker's tolerance. So you get to that parameter by asking a series of would you rather questions. For example, would you rather accept 1% more risk or take 10 extra miles of linear distance? Those sorts of questions have to be asked before you enter in the scenario, because you need to get a sense of the risk take of the decision maker's risk tolerance. And that's actually borrowing some ideas from financial portfolio management to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, here's an example of what this looks like. This is a toy application that's generated as a web output. This is using, for those of you who are into it, this is using R and the Shiny group of tools to create a small web page that will read the structure of the graph. This is sort of a hypothesized anonymized graph, if you will. And then I can change the importance that I give different values, and it will give me different outcomes. Next slide, please. So I talked about putting this on a single board computer, and we've done this here. The $20 bill is not part of the system. It's just for scale. But that little sandwich of 3 circuit boards has a lot of compute on it. It has a Google Coral tensor processing unit that runs at 4 trillion operations per second. It's got a Raspberry Pi 5 quad core processor with 8 gigabytes of RAM. It turns out this is way more compute than you need for this project. And then on the top, I've got a 6-fab cellular modem to offboard the information wirelessly. You're not dependent on Wi-Fi. You can use cellular. The total size of that hardware is about the size of a pack of cards. Total price out the door for everything is under $500. And total weight is around 4 or 5 ounces without the battery. Next slide, please. I believe that this is my last content slide. One of the things that I've been working on with fellow researchers and with students is the utilities of building small computers and to try to get the worst computer to do the best thing. There's a lot of interesting applications that are available for doing this. Here, pictured to the right, is a chatbot that lives on that little gray box next to the cell phone. It turns out there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. And we live in a world where that somebody else's computer might be a computer that you carry in your pocket. I believe I'm running up against time. And so if you can get me to my get off the stage slide, which is my last slide. Thank you very much. So I'm Harrison Schramm. I split my time between operations research and Department of Defense Management. There's my contact information, and then I believe it's also in the program book. Thank you so much. General, you look a lot like Bob Morlock.
Exactly. And so we'll continue with the panelist discussions. Obviously, I am not the MAR Core Syscom commander, but she will be joining us shortly for the Q&A session part. And so we'll continue with the program, and I think it's turning over to Dr. Ayton and Dr. Buettner.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome, thank you, good morning. I'm Philip Antón. I'm the Chief Scientist at the Acquisition Innovation Research Center, referred to as AIRC by its acronym. AIRC is a part of a multi-university CERC-UARC. AIRC is the DoD's avenue for applying business, policy, law, and technical practices and expertise from academia to improve acquisition, efficiency, effectiveness, and speed. Today I'm joined by Dr. Doug Buettner. Doug is my Deputy Chief Scientist of AIRC, and we're here to provide an overview of research that Doug and I conducted with Dr. Carlo Lapizzi. Carlo is a professor of systems, AI, and data science at the Stevens Institute of Technology. Can we skip the next slide, please? So we'll give you a quick overview, run through some of the briefings and key findings, and then happy to answer questions towards the end. Next slide, please. So for background, the OSD's Acquisition Policy and Innovation Directorate asked us to analyze available data to answer Congress's questions from the House Armed Services Committee. Congress asked how much middle tier of acquisition is being used to produce capabilities versus conducting research and development through prototyping. They also asked a range of questions about MTA demographics, contracting, and industry engagement, which will provide some overviews of it. Very briefly, in terms of type of capabilities, we'll provide some additional data shortly. We looked at it two different ways. So we analyzed whether MTAs were producing capabilities by the type of MTA program it was, whether it's a prototyping or a fielding program, and found that there are more prototyping programs than fielding programs in a 60-40 split. We also looked at color of money as a way to get an understanding of how much production is coming out of MTA programs. And that's actually been increasing from 10% to 20%. And we'll show you that chart. In terms of some of the demographics, some of the highlights, they also asked as to whether other transactions were being used for MTAs, and about 44% of MTAs have been using other transactions as opposed to FAR contracts. And they were all interested in a lot of the demographics that Doug will provide some details on in terms of what kinds of companies are out there. Primarily concerned are these manufacturing companies or these research and development types of companies, and it was about 45% of them are in a wide range of manufacturing companies. Next slide, please. So again, in terms of what types of programs are out there, about 40% of them, about 2 out of 5 programs were in the rapid fielding category as opposed to rapid prototyping. So giving you some sense of where the focus was, whether it was on fielding or on prototyping. Next slide, please. In terms of color of money, you can see since 2018, when MTAs were first brought on board, we can analyze how much of by dollars are being spent on procurement. There's been a general increasing trend with some changes up and down as we go through time. So generally increasing on that side, and the RDT&E types of dollars generally decreasing over this time period. I should note that these were data from 2018 to about the middle of 2024, so we didn't have a full accounting of 2024. We're trying to understand where these trends are going. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit more breakout in terms of dollars for procurement, we broke it out by component, the ones that were using MTAs over this time period. These are all in then-year dollars, so they're not adjusted for inflation. But you can see that there are trends over time. The Air Force started ramping up quite a bit. It had been falling over this period, but other components have been increasing over this area to get the total rise in terms of dollars going towards procurement in these MTA programs. So next slide, please. Then I'll turn it over to Doug to talk about a lot of the contracting aspects and demographic aspects of this. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Phil. To go through a little bit more detail on some of the aspects that Phil was pointing out. For the MTA use, what we see when we break it down by service, we see that for the overall percentages, we see that the Air Force's use of non-OTA had pretty much biased the data towards non-OTA use. But then what you see is the Army actually favored OT, so there was a little bit of a split there. with obviously the differences between the Air Force and the Army use causing that, I would say, that bias towards the non-OTAs. Next slide, please. Okay, and then here what we see is trying to break out, what are we actually utilizing the NTAs for? And so if you split it by OTA and non-OTA, what you'll notice is that the both had a pretty much a wide range of industries. In particular, what you see is the R&D part of that and the OTA, and you see that as far and ahead above the administrative and management use. But then when you look at the non-OTA, you see that the R&D aspect of it is pretty much tied with the actual manufacturing of aeronautical and nautical system equipment. Go down to the next slide, please. Now, one of the things that was actually very surprising was the fact that there was a significant impact on small business, where 40% of NTAs were actually going to small businesses, where we used the break of 500 employees or less. And then if you then track that over to the actual revenue, you see it's about the same, maybe slightly less than that 40% in terms of the revenue going. So that was actually a very good news story from this research. Okay, go down to the next slide, please. And then when you look at the demographics in terms of what the companies that were being contracted do, you'll see that just under half are manufacturing companies, and then about 30% were technical services companies, and then purchasing, and then some other, R&D. But then in terms of, are you looking at private and public companies, it was about 75% of the companies were either private or public, with private being about 10% higher. Okay, go down to the next slide, please. And now what we're doing is looking at the split between competed other transactions and then competed non-OTA contracts. One of the things for the competed OTs, you'll see that it's predominantly competed, but when you look at non-OTs, you'll see that it's actually been decreasing. They started out with, let's say better than 70% being competed when we first started utilizing these MTAs, but in recent years, it's dropped down to where most of those are non-competed. Okay, and go to the next slide, please. And now the actual, I would say, transition status, and this is have we actually been moving these prototypes and or the rapid fielding into the SPO and then moving them into production. We found that roughly 30% of the MTAs were being moved in or transitioned, restructured, and so the breakout is there. And then in terms of whether they're active or not active anymore, 60% we found was still active of the MTAs. And if we can go down to the next slide, please. So now the major findings, Phil went through a little bit of this. The type, we found that about 60% is prototyping, whereas 40% is rapid fielding. For the dollars, you saw the production increase about 10 to 20% recently, peaked in 2022. Is there a trend there? It appears to be, but we just have to keep watching it over the future years. Other transactions, 44% of the MTAs were utilizing OTs, and this is versus the full FAR contract. Industry, again, 45% were wide-ranging manufacturing companies in particular. Company size, the impact on small business was significant, and a significant finding. For competition, most of the MT-OTs were competed, where on the slide it should say half of non-OTs were not competed. And then the status, I just went through that a second ago. So now go to the next slide, please. And finally, some additional insights was the steady increase through FY 2023 of NTA utilization of RDT&E funding. We did find no evidence of non-technical use of MTAs, and for that we used product service codes and NASIC data. This was the critical interest aspect from the congressional ask. The PSCs, or the product service codes, demonstrated the MTA purchases were predominantly for parts, engineering services, management services. And if you want the details, we've got a link right here that will take you to the full report on AIRC's website. And that covers everything we had, and we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil and Doug. And now we'll go to Noelle.
Hi, I'm Noelle Shott with the Manpower IT System Modernization portfolio under PEO MLB. And I'm excited to provide this case study of our Manpower and Reserve Affairs programs. So we'll go to the next slide. This is a case study of how the MITSM portfolio overcame the Valley of Death, which are those first 3 years of a program where we don't yet have a program objective memorandum, but we want to get after solving our customers' pain points. We do this using our prototype to program process shown here in the middle of the chart. The process is comprised of 3 phases that we accomplish in the planning phase of the software acquisition pathway. This brief shares the details within our paper that demonstrates how, using this process, we accelerate requirements development, reduce procurement time, allocate resources based on learning, increase customer satisfaction, and conduct our parallel IT transformation planning. The prototype to program process incorporates design thinking, user-centered design. We use OTAs and existing enterprise services to bring speed to acquisition. A little bit about the MITSM portfolio. It was established just over 2 years ago by ASN RDA, and we partner with our customer at Manpower and Reserve Affairs to modernize the human resource development process. This effort focuses on consolidating disparate legacy systems, automating personnel workflows, and enabling data-driven decision-making. This is not just about upgrading technology, but fundamentally restructuring how the human resource development process data is processed and utilized to create more agile, efficient, and a responsive experience focused on the Marines' journey through their human resource customer service. Let's move to the next slide to look at the case study examples. This case study provides examples from the first 2 programs in MITSM using the prototype to program process. The first is Total Force Retention System 2.0, which transforms a manual paper-based reenlistment process into a fully digital workflow, eliminating the need for Marines to hand walk a package around their command and provide career planners and chain of command immediate decision-making information through integrated data sources. TIFRS 2.0 used the NIWC Atlantic IWRP Consortium Other Transaction Authority, starting as a prototype and then transitioning into a production agreement, delivering the minimum viable capability release in under 2 years. The second example in the paper is our first initiative in models modernization, the staffing goal model. This model eliminates inefficiencies caused by redundant data entry, manual record keeping, and disconnected manpower functions, ensuring that leaders have accurate real-time insights into manpower requirements, planning, and forecasting. What's really cool about this effort is that it leverages the existing enterprise services provided by CDAO Advana Jupiter platform. The C3AI technology is already ATO'd. Advana Jupiter already has the data sources we need, and the CDAO has an OTA agreement in place for us to order off of to get the services for configuration. This effort delivered an MVP into production in just 6 months. Going to the next slide, I'd like to pitch anyone who isn't yet a believer in the software acquisition pathway and why it's the only way we should be doing IT acquisition if you want to thrive in the Valley of Death. All right, so background. First, I want to give a shout out to ASNRDA Melissa Merker. Melissa is the plank owner that fought hard for the Department of Navy to get the DoDI 5000.87, specifically in the software planning phase, to not have a timeline associated with it. If you know the execution phase, you have to deliver your MVCR within 1 year. The chart shown here, most folks should be familiar with all the different adaptive acquisition frameworks. Back before 5000.87, software programs had to use the Defense Business System BCAC, shown in the yellow chart. I was in a program that spent 3 years trying to get over all the bureaucracy to get through the first 3 gates in order to put an RFP on the street. Now let's compare that to the software pathway. It only has 2 phases, planning and execution. And the planning phase supports prototyping. This is critical because there is no way a system like TIFRS 2.0 with 3 new SaaS solutions being introduced to the Marine Corps and building several interfaces can achieve an ATO and deploy an MVCR in 1 year in just the software execution phase. You overcome the valley of death in the planning phase of SWAP by prototyping and then transitioning to an OTP, which buys down your schedule risk, and then enter into the SWAP execution phase. Moving to the next slide, we will review the research questions. In writing this research paper, I interviewed my industry partners on both TIFRS 2.0 and Models Modernization. Here's their feedback. For question number 1 and 3, yes, the use of OTAs following an agile development methodology provides a streamlined path for non-traditional vendors to contribute without being hindered by excessive bureaucracy. In the case of TIFRS 2.0, we are integrating 3 SaaS solutions with our PEO digital McBoss environment. When interface testing began, it required everyone, our system integrators, our SaaS providers, Salesforce, Okta, and DocuSign, PEO digital McBoss team, even DISA, to help us troubleshoot the issues. Challenges in rapid prototyping and digital modernization require the entire enterprise to work together, and it's amazing. Amazing. We get all of that support. In number 2, an example of scaling up a pocket of innovation is the use of the C3AI technology on Advana. CDAO provides the ecosystem to foster real-time innovation for rapid prototyping and seamless technology adoption. And moving to number 4, the use of OTA success criteria, which I'll discuss later in the brief, and our agile methodology ensures OTAs are mission-oriented and outcome-driven. We do this through firm fixed price modular contracting. In TIFRS 2.0, the OTA payment milestones are tied to each sprint. And for C3AI, Models Modernization, they deliver new production capability every 6 months. This mitigates risk to the DoD by ensuring we continue to receive quality while also having the ability to adjust our priorities that are given to our customer at M&RA. Now on the next slide, let's start walking through the prototype to program process. The first phase is defined. We are able to accelerate requirements development through the use of design thinking workshops. In curating the agenda for a workshop, I use the principles and techniques from Luma, Think Wrong, Naval X, and Jake Knapp's book titled Sprint. This slide shows a sample agenda that we use to develop the artifacts required for the OTA RFP package in just 2 days. Day 1 outcome creates the user's as-is process, where the Marines identify their pain points and opportunities for improvement. Day 2, Marines develop their to-be process. I always ask them to think about if you're king or queen for the day. Along in those activity boxes on the to-be process, they write their how might we statements. This to-be process and the how might we statements become what is the prototype's minimum viable product and is part of the OTA RFP. Examples of the process and design thinking exercises are provided as enclosures in the paper. You might think 2 days is not enough for requirements development, but remember, we are following Agile, which means during the prototype, it's all requirements gathering through the participation of our Marine SMEs, creating user stories and being part of each sprint. Now moving to the next slide, I will discuss our OTA procurement timeline. We use the NIWC Atlantic IWRP Consortium for OTAs. The benefit of using an established consortium is to take advantage of a pool of vetted non-traditional companies, which streamlines execution and RFP evaluations, which simplifies a lot of documentation. This figure is the timeline for TIFRS 2.0. You can see we went from design thinking workshop to award in 7 months. This is very aggressive and requires a huge commitment from the entire evaluation team. And we were very committed. Again, we're in the valley of death. We exist to exploit other people's money that they can't spend. So having OTA vehicles ready, especially at the end of the fiscal year, is how you win. Let me point out a couple of the collaboration and refinement points in this schedule. First, the industry one-on-ones and white papers, along with demonstrations, are an excellent opportunity for market research. What's great about OTAs is the concept that we, the government, issue the problem statement and it's industry that provides the innovation. After white papers, you take what you learned from all of that and you can update your statement of work. Also, you can collaborate with industry all the way up to the RFP release. White papers are 6 to 7 pages. Proposals are no more than 20 pages, which reduces the volumes I've had to read before when I do FAR-based source selection. As we move to the next slide, I'd be remiss to not give kudos to the NIWC Atlantic IWRP team. You really did give me an easy button. So now we move to the develop phase of the prototype to program process. In this phase, we have awarded our OTA and we are sprinting. We follow a user-centered design agile methodology, which means 1 to 2 sprints ahead is the design sprint, where we wireframe with the Marine SMEs before configuration. We collect several agile metrics in our sprints, but the one critical one to show you here is the customer value metric. This is the example from TIFRS 2.0. This metric is qualitative feedback that captures the Marine end user's experience by role while testing the breadth of newly configured functionality. This helps the Agile development team determine if there are any results with significant variance that could require a training focus or a software enhancement. I put the quality check icon here to link it to the focus of this panel. We can only truly know if we are delivering value by gathering this continuous input each sprint from our customer. If not, you will get to your user acceptance test at the end and fail to meet their expectations and not solve their pain points. On the next slide, we discuss how we allocate resources and invest based on learning. Now we are ready to enter phase 3 and deliver our MVP and enter into the swap execution phase and award an OTP agreement. But first, how do you know that you have delivered something better than what they have today? Here's our next quality check. The first column in the table is shown is the success criteria. This criteria was established by the Marines during the design thinking workshop based on what they mapped out in their as-is and to-be process charts. The second column in orange is the baseline metric of how the current as-is process works today. To determine this criteria, it required us to create a survey. We used the Department of Navy Voice of the Customer tool, Qualtrics. We developed the survey and published it on social media, on Marine Online, and in the current system TIFRS that the career planners use today. We received over 1,500 responses across all our personas. The responses quantified how long it takes today to complete the reenlistments. Finally, the green column is from the MVP UAT, where we re-administer the survey in order to determine if the MVP has delivered its business value. Is it enterprise viable? Is it scalable? Another use for these success criteria is that software pathway requires you to do value assessments every year. So something like this really helps us answer that question. Finally, going to our last slide. In summary, we have learned a lot from our prototyping efforts. Both case study examples have proven efficiencies and provide a better customer experience for the Marine. I believe the MITSM prototype to program process implements industry best practices to rapidly transition technology by ensuring organizations promulgate user-centered design, agile software development, use OTA agreements and existing enterprise services, and follow the software pathway to thrive in the Valley of Death. Our collaboration with our customer at MNRA, along with industry partners, demonstrates the power of rapid digital modernization, ensuring the Marine Corps remains ready and adaptive to the evolving landscape. Thank you.
Fantastic briefings, Harrison, Phil, Doug, and Noelle. And while we wait for General Campbell to show, I wish I was confident enough to ask Harrison a question, but that's not going to be the case, Harrison. So we're going to have to wait for the audience for a question for you to tackle. And you can monitor the Q&A session. Of course, for the attendees, please put your questions in there. We'll try to get to them. I know that Doug and Phil have answered a couple of questions already. And so that's fantastic. I think I'll start off, and I guess I'm going to show my age a little bit because the question is going to be geared toward Phil and Doug on middle tier of acquisition. I guess I started off doing acquisition and as an assistant product manager, my job was to run what we called at the time ACTDs, advanced concept technology demonstrations, or advanced technology demonstrations, and so. And at that time, there was usually a 5-year timeline because we would request money in the POM, the Program Objective Memorandum, for 5 years, and we'd show a plan to either transition the technology or field a limited residual technology, and so. So I asked just Doug and Phil, in your research on studying MTAs, I'm fascinated on the 5-year timeline because none of the other acquisition pathways have an arbitrary timeline except for urgent, right, and software, which is pretty much do it as quickly as possible or within a year, a budget year.
2 years, yeah.
So, yeah, do you have any insights on that? When we set schedule, right? Arbitrarily like that, independent of the technology, independent of the thing we're buying. Do you have any insights on that?
Well, I'm guessing at some point that the 5 was an approximate. I mean, we have 2 years is the limit on urgent. Let's make something longer as we're going to it. I don't know if there was hard reasoning behind 5 as opposed to 4 or 6, those kinds of things. I do know that comparison to things like ACTDs, that to me, the big thing that's different on MTAs is that you don't have to go through JSONs. You can tailor acquisition. They say, well, you can tailor acquisition. Well, I can already tailor acquisition on major capabilities. It's all up to getting the milestone decision authority to approve it. But given the fact that you don't have to go through JSONs, I think they wanted to put some kind of cap on it to say, well, you can't just do everything in there. We want to drive you in terms of time. So I think that's my read of the motivation on it. But yeah, otherwise I think we'd have to go talk to the folks that wrote the legislation over.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, and that's fine. I didn't. Obviously, I didn't give you all these questions beforehand, so I appreciate your insights into that. And yeah, the arbitrary, just the arbitrary nature of it always it kind of fascinates me because it's misleading to the non-acquisition professional because as we educate, train, and we execute programs, we see that 5-year timeline, and it kind of indicates, well, let's pick that one, or why not 4? And so that's I appreciate your insights into that.
So I might add that if you look at MDAPs, the average cycle time from, say, program initiation at milestone B or C to IOC has been running about 7. It's actually dropping right now, and we're working on a paper now to get the result out there, which is fascinating. But that's maybe another realm to say, well, do I want it to make it as long as sort of an average MDAP? Well, maybe not. Maybe let's and we really do want to make you go faster. That's why we're trying this here.
Yeah, I was going to add in. I was going to add in really quick. One of the other things I found interesting was with the non-competed aspect, right? And so sometimes with a non-competed, why are you trying not to compete? Because you want to pick somebody that can do the work or has done something similar before. So
yeah, I appreciate that insight. And now, and so this is very good for you all. We do have your panel chair here, and so I'm proud to introduce the panel to the MARCOR SysCom CG, Brigadier General Campbell, and so I'm gonna transition this to her, and we'll try to do this as smoothly as possible. So in a second, she'll come on.
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Fabulous. Welcome. Fine.
Great. It's great to see some familiar faces. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to join you today. I know that we've been running fast, and I know that you guys have put a lot of work into these papers and the panels, and appreciate the time that you've taken to put those together and taken the time to present, right? That's a huge accomplishment on your part and says a lot about the dedication and your commitment to our work in the acquisition space. So I just want to take an opportunity just quickly to introduce myself. myself. So I'm Brigadier General Tamara Campbell. I'm the commander for Marine Corps Systems Command. This is my third tour at Marine Corps Systems Command. I'm also an MPS grad, class of 2003 out of the business school. And I'm truly excited to have an opportunity to join you guys, especially considering that the work that you're doing and the papers that you've discussed are very critical and compelling for the work that we do at Marine Corps Systems Command. Absolutely, our mission is to make sure that we can equip our Marines, and understanding how we do that through the IT space, through the efficiencies and the challenges that we face throughout that space. And you guys coming and taking a shot at, hey, how do we change, other transaction authorities, the risk management framework, right? Ways that we can make our work and our business better is applaudable. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time and the opportunity to do that. So I know you guys have been finished presenting the panels. You're ready for a couple more questions. I think we've got some that have been answered, and we've got just about 20 more minutes or so for the opportunity to answer and ask and answer a couple more questions. So you guys ready for me to go and hit that? All right, excellent. So I think one of the questions that we've had are, from Ms. Shott. Hi, Noelle, how are you?
Hi.
Is that you've mentioned how you're paralleling IT transformation planning your brief. Can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is in the paper a little bit, didn't have time to get into it in the brief, but yeah, it's all about, we have to be able to do more than one thing at a time. And so our other transaction authority statements of work for both the Total Force Retention System 2.0 and our C3AI models modernization effort, we asked those vendors to help us with our digital transformation planning. And so a lot of work on the MetroStar team that had TIFRS 2.0 to look at all of our legacy systems and come up with an app rationalization plan. On the C3AI side, models modernization, well, the Marine Corps uses over 33 models today. And they spent months working with all of the SMEs at the Marsh Center and other external commands to come up with a brand new, like I said, a brand new way, transformative way to, instead of having all these silo models, to combine them into processes that make sense from that Marine's journey through HR. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I know that, especially with the MITSM portfolio and how we do manpower and recruiting, having those different siloed models is really problematic, right? And it makes it very difficult to manage a Marine's career and to manage that. So having the opportunity to collapse some of those and create some efficiencies in that space is absolutely important. All right. So follow-up broader question on metrics for Phil, Doug, and Noelle. What are the current or new metrics do you think are most valuable for the MTA or the software pathway? For the current metrics like transition, are there any nuances you discovered while doing this research?
So, geez, we could talk for hours about metrics on it, but and we could do it offline if there are folks that want to follow up, like great first question. But to me, I think it's some of the fundamentals. We want to go faster. We're doing MTA. Is it faster? Well, are we losing something to go faster? Is it costing us more? Are our life cycle costs going higher? Are the products not testing as well? Are they less disciplined? Those kinds of things to understand, well, what am I getting for this trade-off? How much faster is it? And so on. As we're going through it, are we actually serving the warfighters' needs? Are we hitting the sort of the golden 70-80% solutions better than we would have otherwise, and so on? So there have been a lot of discussions about how do we get the metrics, and I think to some degree at the OSD level, at least, are trying to improve these kinds of areas. In terms of transition metrics, I'll chime in too. There's just not a lot of data at the OSD level, at least. So they're trying to get more of an insight into what's really happening there. Transition to what? Did you cancel? Was that a good thing or a bad thing? So
right.
The numbers are still pretty preliminary, and deeper insights, what I think allows to get a better understanding of what's happening. Doug?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, part of the problem, I mean, one of the first questions I answered was, the life cycle cost part of it. Well, I really don't have any data. If I don't have any data or any metrics, right, I can't answer the question. That was a great question though. So it's things like that, and then being able to have it right, filter itself up into the Dave database where OSD
Mhm.
has the information and that we can then analyze. Over.
I can jump in if you'd like. So yeah, I mean, that's a good question about metrics and how you evaluate if the prototype, for instance, is ready to transition. I guess something to keep in mind is we never are going to have enough money to do everything we want. The process we use by focusing in on minimum viable products requires our customer, specifically at MNRA, to really focus in on picking that MVP. And they've done a phenomenal job. I've been really impressed and I'm really happy to work with them. I think also the success criteria is important. So a success criteria that we talked about in the brief and in the paper is specific to each business process that you do. And so that's important to keep in mind because you're trying to decide, is this enterprise viable? Is it, I think someone has a hot mic, but yeah, is it enterprise viable? Is it scalable? Is it better than what they have today? And that's really important because modern IT is expensive. If we're using SaaS products, if we're in the cloud, it's very expensive. So you've got to deliver something better than what they have today. And using stuff like success criteria, those metrics that you're measuring, that's how we're doing it. Thanks.
Thanks, Noelle. I appreciate that, and apologies for the extra noise. No, to your point, and Phil and Doug, understanding what metrics we're trying to drive towards and understand what the objective is, right, is the key focus. If we don't know what we're driving towards and understand what those are, how do we develop metrics to ensure that we are getting the results that we need? And then having that user feedback as part of the process is critical, right? As you're doing your sprints or doing a scrum to understand kind of how you're building out to get to and develop the criteria that you need. So really need to make sure that we have that right. And I think one of the things that I learned while I was here is I think in my systems engineering class, they talked about better is the enemy of the good enough. And so I think, Phil, you kind of talked about that. What is good enough? Where do we need to be and how do we account for that? And how do we track that through either our transitions, making sure that if we are going to fail, we fail fast and we understand why we failed and moved on and we've learned the lessons through that process, but also understanding to ensure that we are meeting the objectives of what we set out to do and that we're not running astray or gold plating for what the service member and the warrior needs for this development. Appreciate you guys for that. Okay, a couple more questions. I think we've still got about a good 15 minutes. So here, I think a question for Dr. Schramm. So are you including analysis of options to procure negative slack early in a project or activity and before an event causes schedule delays or cost overruns or technical overruns, and whether those actions, which are almost always way more cost efficient, have a better impact than waiting for a bad event and then putting expensive recovery actions in place?
So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm going to
Mhm.
do what engineers do, which means I'm going to cross out the question that was asked. I'm going to write in the question that I want to answer, but I think it'll be illustrative. So one of the things that we have to think about when we think about moving stuff in the INDOPACOM AOR and the material specifically is that historically the Navy and the Marine Corps, which it supports, have had what Professor Wayne Hughes used to call the sanctuary of the sea,
Mhm.
which is a very elegant way of saying, hey, if we just run away far enough, we don't have to worry about the enemy. If you are a logistician and if you are participating in war games, and at the end of those war games, you walk away with a smile and you met all the criteria, then your scenario was not challenging enough. So
Mm.
to the point, I'm going to answer the question behind the question, which is if you think about great power competition, particularly in INDOPACOM AOR, we are going to have to make choices where we are going to have to intentionally sacrifice supply assets to get critical munitions or supplies to the fight. And we are going to have to make deliberate, disciplined choices about where we accept risk and where we don't accept risk. And all of us go back to the flight deck and crack my first career was as a helicopter pilot, and crack open a beer, Top Gun Maverick style. That's not how this is going to play out.
Mm.
So in the absence, the best thing that people in operations research can do is impose a rigorous set of tools upon the decision. And ultimately, where those risks are going to be taken is going to be up to the flag officers like General Campbell. But a sober understanding right now of, hey, not everybody's going to walk away from this, and we are going to have to make intentional decisions about sacrificing units is a way we haven't thought since the Second World War. But we need to start thinking that way in our CP exercises and in our war games. Over.
Thank you, Dr. Schramm, for that. I think that's critically important, right? One of the things that we talk about a lot in our acquisition world is the ability to ensure that we have a fully informed conversation about the operating environment, what the true nature of the things that we're going to do are, right? Because sometimes we fairy dust what we think is going to happen, especially when we do play the problem and we're in exercises, and to really have a real conversation about what can truly happen, what's the depletion of our magazine depth, and how do we react to that? And then what do we plan for and what can we not plan for so that we have a pivot strategy is really the big conversation so that we're planning appropriately to meet the challenge that we'll face in that area. All right. So I think I have another one. This one is not to any particular panelist, but have there been discussions on allowing other major commands to conduct procurement activities if they have personnel with the proper training and certification in order to streamline the procurement process and allow platform owners to manage their own programs, i.e., TCOM conducting procurement activities vice it being managed through PM Traces? Now, I
Yeah,
think that's probably Noelle. Maybe
Okay.
you're probably best suited,
Yeah.
from the Marine Corps System Command PEO world.
Yeah, absolutely. I will go to whatever contracting activity can do it faster. So, yeah, absolutely. So DICO, so I'm part of Marine Corps Systems Command. That would be my contracting activity. But I go to DICO, which is run by DISA. They have an amazing self-service area where you can get all their templates, and then they have their procurement lead times, and we just MIPR funding over there, and they award the contract. Army Contracting Command has trade wins, which is where C3AI's OTA is. So again, we'll just MIPR money over there. So yeah, absolutely. There's not, I think the general rule of thumb is give your contracting activity first right of refusal, right? But everybody is spread thin, especially with the DERPs. So I think we might see more and more of that where we're having to go to other commands that might have the bandwidth to take on contract actions. Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to comment? All right. So I'll just throw an audible here. So I think the question kind of pertains to, I think a lot of folks are focused on going fast and looking for opportunities to create space and contracting and other things that sometimes take a little bit longer. I think the real question behind that is that, do we have the relationships built in order to work together to ensure that we're meeting the needs of, in this case, I think it was TCOM and Traces was the two relationships that were brought out, ensure that we can meet the objective of both those folks that are looking to set the requirements and the folks that are managing that material solution for that requirement. So I think it really comes down to, and what I've learned in my, throughout my 20 plus years doing acquisitions, it's about the relationships. This job is and this environment is all about those relationships. And I've had a boss that said, build them before you need them. And so that means working on that, ensuring that we understand what the objectives are that both are trying to work to, and figure out how to get to yes, if not no but, right, is really the what we really need to work towards. And I think then we can work to positive solutions between us and whoever has the opportunities and the rights and understands the statutes and regulations surrounding that to be able to do the work, and we can do that appropriately. That's where we need to go. All right. Let's see. So Noelle, I think there are a lot of questions on here for you. I'm going to ask one that may be a little broad because there's been a lot of conversation about OTA software pathways. And I know you guys probably talked about that earlier in the conversation as the new administration pushes to open up those pathways to create better efficiencies and agility within the acquisition space from a reform perspective, but also to open up our space to more non-traditionals. And so are there, and this is for anyone, it's addressed to Noelle, but are your contracts actions within the OTA framework limited to a group of contractors that are already qualified and on the OTA list? Are outside companies able to protest the OTA use? Ooh, that's an interesting one. Or get involved if they choose to. And what is your typical time from RFP to award on an OTA vehicle? So I think if we pull the question up a bit, it's just really talking about OTA and OTA consortiums and how you access OTAs, and if we can expand that to other software pathways to get folks decrease barriers of entry, right, to working with the government. So folks, please feel free to chime in on any of that.
Yeah, I can go first if you'd like. So yeah, absolutely. If a non-traditional company is interested, go out to a consortium like we use IWRP in Niwik Atlantic. There are ways to join that consortium. You do have to be part of the consortium in order to bid on the proposals. And then what was the other second part of that question?
It asked about, do you have to be a part of the list, which you just answered?
Oh,
Are
yeah.
the outside companies able to protest
Yeah.
OTA use or get involved if they choose to?
Right. Yeah. So I don't think OTAs can be, I mean, they're competed. So I don't think they're generally protested. I can't answer that for sure. The other part I would say, if with non-traditional companies, so we're doing this right now, one of our OTAs where we did select a proposal that had more of a non-traditional prime, but we want to test the technology that they're bringing with them from a non-traditional company. The struggle that we have in the DoD is really to do anything that product needs to be IL4, impact level 4, so we could put our CUI data in it. It takes too long to get IL4 provisional authorities through DISA, and it's not on them. I think it's just the fact of the life of resourcing, and there's a lot of companies that want to get through the process. So that is a challenge with non-traditional companies, is a lot of times they need the government to sponsor them, and so they can get into an OTA, but OTAs are also supposed to be fast, right? We want to deliver to market fast. So that's the difficult part that we're actually experiencing right now. Thanks.
And then lastly, and I know Dr. Schramm, I see you, I'll come to you next, is the timeline for RFP to award on an OTA vehicle. If are there any tentative timelines that you can share? Yeah,
we do 7 months. So it's it's very aggressive. It takes a huge commitment from the entire evaluation team. On all of mine, I mean, we worked late into the evening. We were meeting with industry vendors every single day. So I mean, that was our job. That was our duty assignment at the time. We even worked weekends because we had to get it done by the end of the fiscal year because we were going to spend other people's money that they couldn't spend. And so yeah, it's a aggressive timeline. If you want to get it done, you have to be aggressive.
Thanks, Noelle. And Dr. Schramm?
I just wanted to chime in here with in a previous life before I'm doing what I'm doing now. I've been with small companies that have tried to do business with the government, and I would encourage folks just broadly to try to turn the chessboard around and look at the problem from the perspective of somebody who has innovation but wants to bring it to the government. The impediments are daunting, and frequently good companies will simply give up because the flash to bang is too long and the list of things that you have to do in order to do business with the government grows. I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, but part of the reason why we have the system we have is because of the incentives that we have. So we should rethink the incentives if we want to have a different system. Over.
Thanks for that. So folks, I think we only have about 5 minutes remaining. I want to give an opportunity if any of you have any closing remarks to share with the audience. I know, Phil, you were typing in that last question, so I'm going to start with you maybe and then go around the horn, and then I'll just close out.
Great. Thanks, General. Yeah, I just put in a link. There are some limited abilities to review OTs. It's complicated. So I put a link in the Q&A to a DAU overview briefing for you. But no, just thank you for the opportunity. It is interesting that with middle tier, we are trying to go faster and field things, not just do prototyping. So I thought that was an interesting question that Congress asked, and it does look like there are those upward trends. Of course, MTAs are pretty new, so you might expect them to start with much more prototyping than production, but it'll be interesting to see in the few years where the trends go. Doug, anything from?
No, I was going to add in, and specifically on the contracting officers, right? Just making sure that they do understand that you do have those NTA contracting approaches available to go faster. I think that first and foremost is probably the thing that we need to make sure is happening. Over.
Thanks, and Dr. Schramm.
Yes, I just wanted to say that getting back to the topic of my original talk, think about what your future computers are going to look like. They might be very small and very cheap.
Thanks, Noelle.
Yeah, I know that there was a question from Preston, and I hit send, I think, before I finished, but a good question about an agile methodology. It's all about having Marine SMEs and product owners involved, day on, stay on in all the sprints. And how do I do that? Well, I'm a little harsh when I preach how great agile is, and I make it very clear to MNRA, who has been absolutely fantastic at this, that they've got to provide the SMEs. Our product owners are great. They're involved throughout the sprints, their user stories, acceptance testing, everything. And they know how important it is. If you don't have the SMEs involved throughout Agile, like I said, you're going to get to user acceptance test, and it's not going to go well because you're not going to meet the user's expectations. And yeah, I think also just from lessons learned, I saw a question about that. Trying to move at the speed of relevance is difficult in IT because we have, rightfully so, cybersecurity requirements. But when we're introducing innovation like multiple SaaS products, that can be more timely than originally expected. At least I've learned that on a recent OTA. So lots of things to always keep in mind when we're doing this. Thank you.
Yep. So thank you to Doug, Phil, Noelle, and Dr. Schramm for you participating in the panel, taking the time to write these papers, and congratulations on being selected as part of this panel. And I really appreciate your thoughts, and I know the audience did as well. So lots to share, lots going on in this space, and it's evolving, right? So please continue to learn and share. We cannot do this alone. This is a team sport. That includes our users, as you mentioned, our industry partners, academia, as well as the folks that are operating in the big A acquisition space. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you. Have a fantastic day.